I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker today. Beth Kassab is a writer and an external communications manager at AdventHealth, where she works with the Neuroscience Institute and other specialty areas. Beth spent 20 years as a journalist at the Orlando Sentinel before turning to her other passion, healthcare. In 2018, Beth and her husband were both diagnosed with brain tumors just months apart. While their diagnoses were very different and both are healthy today, the experience sparked her desire to help other patients and raise awareness for families confronting brain cancer, such as her husband's diagnosis. Beth volunteers as a peer mentor with the American Brain Tumor Association and serves on the advisory council for her alma mater, the University of Florida's journalism department. Her writing has been recognized by the Scripps Howard Foundation, the Associated Press sports editors, and the Florida Society of News Editors. Beth lives with her husband and 2 children in Oviedo. Please welcome Beth.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me here today. It's really an honor to be here and with everybody amongst people safely and spaced. So I'm really happy to see that. It's been since well before the pandemic that I've given a talk in person. So this is a great thing. Thanks to the Seminole Chamber for inviting me and for all of the sponsors here, especially hospital colleagues at AdventHealth who have welcomed me and made me feel like I have a new home there, in Orlando Health, which is putting on this event, and just so many good healthcare colleagues in the room today, which is good because I'm going to be talking a good amount about health. So let me start with a question. What if I told you that and if I'm getting too far from the mic here, just let me know. What if I told you that day after day, week after week, month after month, I felt a kind of mental paralysis. I was going through the motions of life, but I wasn't really living. I was outwardly taking care of my kids and my family. I was performing my job. But inwardly, I often kind of felt like I was screaming at the top of my lungs, or depending on the day, numbed into silence by fear of the unknown. So if I told you that I spent month after month, day after day like that, you would probably say, welcome to 2020. You know, let's get the pandemic party started. So obviously though, for me, that feeling dominated 2018. This is before anyone had ever heard of a statewide quarantine, or we worried about like which masks were gonna fog up our glasses more and all those kinds of things. So so I started having this feeling, and if I told you back then all of that, what would you say? Well, one possible response is you would say, well, what's wrong? Is everything okay? And at that time, that was the hardest question for me to answer. Everything was not okay. If I answered that question honestly, I would say no. My husband was diagnosed with what is technically terminal brain cancer, and just 6 months later, I was diagnosed with a brain tumor too. But at that time, I could not say that out loud to very many people outside of a close circle. The truth was just too hard, too painful, too frightening. I spent, at the time I was a journalist at the Orlando Sentinel, And I actually wrote a great deal about our family's experience with my husband's diagnosis. I had written quite a few stories and columns. And, you know, when I stand here today, I barely remember writing those. I can remember a little bit, but I think I was still a little bit in shock. And so when I was diagnosed, and even though I was told, hey, your tumor is very different, you know, you just need some treatment, it was so hard to face. I just tapped out. I made the decision I wasn't going to write any more about any of this. And I was, you know, figured something was going to have to change. I was going to have to do something different here because this, just the truth was just so very difficult. And part of that, just to give you a little bit more detail, you know, writing about it at that time, writing can be a really cathartic process, right? So, and for me, it was when I initially started writing that year. When it came to my own diagnosis, though, it was like, you know, holding my own mortality up close. It was, you know, causing me to face that head on in a way that was just extremely difficult at that time. With my husband and I both being sick at the same time, you know, the big question in our minds was, you know, what was going to happen to our family? What would happen to our two children? So when the 2020 hit and the pandemic started sweeping through all of our homes and offices, in every facet of our life, I thought, you know, I bet a lot of people right now are experiencing these same feelings that I had gone through with these dual diagnoses. They are also facing some unspeakable truths about the health of themselves or a loved one, or the health of their business or the health of their career. And considering we are still full throttle into this global pandemic, I imagine many people are still feeling this way. In fact, mental health experts and surveys are telling us that we are only now starting to see the full toll of the pandemic on our community's mental wellness. Speaking of pandemic, I should have taken off my mask. I am not a mental health expert or an expert on brain cancer, but I am pretty knowledgeable and I've seen these things up close. So I'm not here to serve you platitudes or preach about the difference self-compassion, yoga, healthy eating, exercise, and spiritual growth can make, though I do believe in all of those things. I believe in body, mind, and spirit. But I will share a lesson, one lesson, you know, there are many, that has helped me immensely. I want everyone to know one simple thing. It is that you can get through whatever you're going through and everything will be okay. The secret to accepting that point of view is that you are going to have to consider that what you consider to be the definition of okay is going to change and may not necessarily be better. It may not necessarily worse, but it is going to be different. That okay, the okay we have tomorrow or a year from now, you're still going to find happiness. You're still going to experience grief, but it is completely normal and common to feel both of those things at once and to experience a lot of a very curvy path to get from one okay to the next. So I'm going to tell you a story to illustrate why I am so confident in this. As I mentioned earlier, this story starts in 2018. To be precise, it was January 12th, a Friday at 4:26 in the afternoon. and I started to know something wasn't right. I was at my desk in the Orlando Sentinel newsroom at the time, and I was finishing some work on a story and hoping to wrap up for the day. And a text came in from my husband. My phone started buzzing I had these big piles of paper on my desk, and my phone starts buzzing under the papers. And the first text was really unremarkable in every way. He just said, "Hey, I'm going to get the kids right now," which was something he often did. He would go pick up our kids after school. A lot of times I was still at my office. And I responded back, didn't thank him, took that totally for granted. And I just said, "Well, can we go to Carrabba's tonight? Because I'm really hungry. There's no food here today." And in that moment, my biggest annoyance was that there was not enough like cake or junk food in the newsroom for me to graze on. So a few minutes later, he came home with the kids, and he wrote me another text, and he said, "I feel really strange. I feel like I have a car or a house alarm or a game of laser tag going on in my head. I am also smelling and tasting things that aren't there, and I can't quite figure out what they're supposed to be." And so we exchanged a couple more texts. And of course, my rational brain was thinking, okay, well, he had just been diagnosed with the flu a few days earlier. He's probably having some, something related to that. And then he sent me a final text, and it was a lot of gobbledygook. It was some misspellings, but what he was trying to convey is that he could see like a countdown clock in his line of sight, like at the Space Center. And I thought, well, that's not normal. So I immediately left, and I started driving home. There was a lot of traffic. I was trying to get from downtown Orlando to our home in Oviedo. And him and I talked a couple more times. And I also talked to our primary care physician, who also spoke to him on the phone, and who told me, hey, if he's still acting like this when you get home, you need to take him to the emergency room. So the next thing I remember after that is I'm pulling into my neighborhood. My phone rings again. It's Grady's number. But I immediately answered it. But it was my, at the time, 9-year-old daughter's tiny little voice. And she said, "Daddy fell on the ground. He's shaking. He's not waking up." "I'll be right there," I told her. I have given thanks hundreds of times since then that I was driving down our street when she called. I sped into our driveway. I ran into the house and dialed 911. Grady was on the floor in the living room. I knelt down next to him. His eyes were rolled back in his head. He wasn't responding to anything that we were doing or saying. We had never seen a seizure before, and Grady had always been a really healthy guy. He was super healthy, super fit, only 42 years old. So what I have learned since then, though, is that those moments of chaos and horror for us are absolutely common. This is the way hundreds and hundreds of families each year start their journey with brain cancer. Seizure is often the first presenting symptom, not always, but for a myriad of brain cancers. It can be, there are primary brain cancers and there are secondary brain mets, and seizure is often a symptom. That is one of the greatest cruelties of this disease, is it can strike down a perfectly healthy person with no other warning whatsoever. This year, about 700,000 Americans are living with a brain tumor. Most are benign, and that's the category that I was fortunate enough to fall into. About 30% are malignant, and that's a different road. It requires a lot more treatment. The average survival rate for malignant brain tumors is only 35%. There is a lot of exciting research taking place, but we certainly need to do more in that area. So after that first seizure, we spent weeks upon weeks trying to learn what was wrong. Within hours, of course, the doctors performed a CT scan, and then he had an MRI, and they knew there was something wrong. But while the seizure was a very, very common presenting symptom, what wasn't common was that on the imaging, the tumor looked very diffuse, and there was a lot of swelling in the brain. And we were hoping that because he had the flu, like, okay, maybe this could be something else. Maybe this wasn't a tumor. And a few times they came into the room and they said, well, what we could do is a brain biopsy. And we'll just, drill a hole in the head and do all that. And I was like, hard pass. No, that does not sound fun. And that was also considered a very reasonable course of action at that time. We were trying to allow some time for some medicine to work and bring down that swelling and see what was going on. Unfortunately, though, we did end up with a brain biopsy, and that did, in fact, confirm an aggressive form of glioma called an anaplastic astrocytoma. Back then, I could not even pronounce the word astrocytoma. I've come a long way since then. Today, I can rattle off a list of approved and experimental treatments and gene mutations that might affect the outcomes of those treatments, such as IDH1, IDH2, mutant versus wild type, or TP53. I've read all the studies. I know about what the extent of tumor resection means versus not. I've spent a lot of time on PubMed trying to figure out the best thing to do. And while, again, I'm not an expert on the disease, I certainly, I'm about as good as you can get from a layman's perspective. So advocacy is really important when you are facing a really difficult diagnosis. I'm sure I'm not the only one in this room who knows that. Many people here have probably been through their own really difficult times health-wise. And so I kind of took on that role for Grady. And I think that was really important. So as I was taking on this role that I believed I was creating for myself as an advocate and a wife, and I was going to keep everything together, I started noticing that I just wasn't feeling right myself. During a couple of Grady's hospital stays, I would sometimes get this feeling like I was really dizzy. I felt at the time that maybe it was just stress. We were going through a lot of changes. My routine was completely off balance. I was spending a lot of time with Grady at these medical appointments versus going to work. We were keeping the kids normal, thanks to my parents and some others who helped us out. But, we were going through a difficult time. So my ear started really bothering me, probably within a couple weeks of Grady's third surgery. And I reported it to my primary care doctor. Later, I saw an ENT, and nobody could really see anything. I thought, well, maybe I have an ear infection. Kids get ear infections. Why couldn't I maybe get an ear infection? Felt like my ear was really plugged up, and my hearing was kind of fading. And eventually, after reporting these symptoms to several different doctors, they kept looking in my ear and saying, nope, looks great. Take some cold medicine. Finally, an MRI was ordered. And unfortunately, that MRI did show a tumor pressing up against my internal auditory canal, which is why I felt that horrible pressure. So I left the doctor's office holding my own MRI report now. And my advocacy instinct kicked in, but I remember even thinking in that moment, I don't know if I can do this for myself, what I've been doing for several months now for Grady. But I also had a second thought, which was, oh my gosh, how lucky. I know all these brain surgeons now. So I had several of them in my phone. So I dialed, or I actually texted one of Grady's doctors. And I was so fortunate that she called me back. And I even said to her, listen, we had been in close contact because Grady had a couple complications. And I said, hey, he's fine. It's not about him. I need to talk to you about something else. And she called me back. And, in that moment, she wasn't even in the same room with me. But I think some people now maybe have a little more experience with telehealth through the pandemic. Everybody's sort of learning the benefits of that. So in that moment, I was sitting in my car in the parking lot of a doctor's office, and she gave me the best possible medicine anyone could have given me in that moment, which is that she let me read the MRI report out loud to her. She asked me to overnight the disc with my images. And based on what I was telling her, she told me that she thought my prognosis was excellent. And that's the word she used. And I just kind of crumbled and sort of decided, I've got to make this okay. So from there, I set about trying to figure out what my next steps were going to be. And that was going to be difficult because at the time, Grady was actually in daily radiation and chemotherapy for his own situation. And that's another cruelty of the aggressive glioma forms of brain cancer, is that, it can rob you of the person who is your partner, even while that person is still alive, because these treatments can be so intense that they're so fatigued. Now, Grady, being as young and healthy as he was, did great. And we are so fortunate. He barely batted an eye. So ultimately, I was given some choices about how to proceed in my own case. I was told I wasn't probably going to need daily radiation or chemotherapy, but they felt like I should have surgery because the idea would be to preserve my hearing that was left and also to prevent any future issues. So I went through a process of meeting with a lot of doctors. And ultimately, I decided to have gamma knife stereotactic radiosurgery, and that was in September of 2018. There were some advantages to gamma knife over open surgery, and there were some advantages to open surgery over gamma knife. It was a really tough decision. I don't envy anyone who has to make a decision about medical issues, because sometimes you can go in two different directions and there's not really a wrong answer. But it was tough. One of the risks of open surgery for me was that, okay, they would be able to open up my skull, take the tumor out, but because of where it was sitting, I would likely completely lose my hearing on that side. And you could possibly end up with half the face paralyzed. And the doctor told me that, and I was like, oh, okay, so Botox, right? This would just be a lifetime Botox. That would be okay. And he said, no, your face would droop down. And I was like, oh, well, I don't want that. So, but the chance of that happening was very, very small. And I actually, for a while, was moving in that direction because the chance was small. And frankly, if you have, vanity aside, right? The most important thing was the preservation of my health overall. Ultimately, though, gamma knife was the right choice for me. I underwent that. and it was, went very smoothly, I was told. I left really early in the morning. I was back at home on my couch before the kids were even home from school that day. And that shows you how very different the world of brain tumors can be. There's over 120 different types of brain tumors. And so a lot of times you'll see a story in a newspaper or on TV and it'll say, this person has a brain tumor, and it could mean many, many different things. So for those of you counting along at home, that's 3 brain surgeries for Grady and 1 for me. So that's 4 brain procedures in 7 months between the 2 of us. It was, we did a lot of normal things during that time though, you know, took the kids, celebrated birthdays, took the kids to the theme parks. Everything was open, amazingly. We ate, I'm pretty sure we ate at a lot of restaurants, you know, did things we weren't able to do today as much. So that was 2.5 years ago. And today I feel great. My MRIs look good. Of course, I will continue to have checkups for the rest of my life. Grady is also feeling great. His MRIs are very stable. He's done with all of his treatment for now. He's working. He worked through everything, including his radiation. And, you know, we are living our lives the best way we can. Sometimes I hear people call their cancer diagnosis a blessing in disguise. I don't agree with that. I don't think anything about cancer is a blessing, but what you decide to do about cancer and the way you react, the way you change, the way you treat others, and in turn, how they treat you, the way you lean into your faith and embrace a whole person mode to health, body, mind, and spirit, the way you wake up every morning determined to make something better in your little corner of the world, that part is a blessing. Recently, I heard one of our ICU nurses at AdventHealth talk about how the pandemic has served as a reset for her family. And I thought this was so wise. This is one of, because I sort of embrace this philosophy as well. And I believe this is truly the definition of resilience. This nurse is someone like the nurse we had here today who walks in every single day to the ICU, suits up in every imaginable piece of PPE, walks in and provides up close and personal care to some of the most ill COVID patients in our region. She doesn't see the pandemic as a blessing. She's seen so much suffering. That part is not a blessing. But the way she and her family responded to the pandemic is a blessing. It is that reset. She said her family started cooking together more because everyone was home, parents and kids no longer flying in different directions for school and work and activities. And that very much mirrored how we ended up approaching life toward the end of 2018 when we stopped having to run in so many different places and we were able to start really establishing a new normal. So what is next for us? I don't know. Life could be very different tomorrow or a year from now. I know that very well now. But that story I told you in the beginning about what would you say if I told you I was feeling all these things, and you would ask, well, what is wrong? And is everything okay? And I was so scared to answer because I was so scared of this new truth that was being held up in front of me. I am no longer as scared of the unknown. I've been willing to embrace that. I know that everything will be okay. Okay today is going to look different from okay tomorrow, but I'm okay with that. So that's the message I was hoping to leave you with. And I would be happy to take any questions from anyone here.
Beth, I'll just say how I'm so grateful to see you. I've been reading your columns for years and years. You have given me so much insight and so much pleasure. And you are a fighter. You are a fighter. So for you to be up here and talk this way, I am not surprised. You bring to light so many issues that are going around in Central Florida and Florida. So I am just, it is a joy to see you.
Oh, thank you so much. Any other questions? I'm used to doing a lot of Q&A, so this is a quiet group. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I think that while many of us will not have the same experience, your resilience is something that everyone can identify with, especially right now. And many of us are juggling different challenges, but learning to stop and listening to yourself is so important. Thank you for sharing today. Now, it wouldn't be a chamber event without a door prize. Nathaniel, I think he's coming with a winner. And while he brings that up, if you are not a member yet, please speak with Christina before you leave. She's going to do her princess wave back in the back. She'll be happy to let you know about all the things we have going on. Thank you. There's also some event flyers that are on your seats. Please take those with you. We have a lot of things coming up. We have our Good Morning Seminole next week on April 1st, and it is almost sold out, so please register soon. We also have Seminole Tech on April 7th, and the Lake Mary State of the City will be on April 29th. There's also a few Business Expo booths left, and that will be in July, so please speak with Nathaniel if you are interested in attending that. Thank you again to all of our amazing sponsors, Orlando Health, Fairwinds, the Orlando Law Group, Witham Smith & Brown, Florida Blue, Veritas, Sanitas, and the Sanford Orlando International Airport. Courtney Fleming from Topgolf is the winner of a $25 gift card to Boston Coffee. Nathaniel has your gift card. And thank you to the Westin for an amazing lunch and hosting us today. Have a wonderful Seminole County day.